The new hype in the world of investing is quantum computing. Stocks in quantum computing can go up 5 times, 10 times, or even 20 times. Is this the right time to get into quantum computing? Let me talk to you about this in the video. First, a bit of content about what is it exactly, quantum computing. And then you can already Vagava, very complex. The second part is which quantum computing stocks are there currently options where you can directly benefit from this trend? And then a section about an ETF. That might be a somewhat safer choice, but safe is in quotes because it's extremely speculative. I'll also show you why. Let's start in case you don't know me yet. My name is Jorik Vermeulen, founder of Happy Investors. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I'm a risk-taking investor, preferably in growth stocks with explosive growth, and I don't shy away from technology stocks either. I find it really interesting. Quantum is definitely very interesting. It's just complex material. It's a bit the same with semiconductors. It's harder to determine who the real winners are, and people think they do, but who really knows for sure? And quantum computing at this stage is definitely a subject, a domain where you really need to be careful about who you listen to. And I'm just very honest. I invested 3 days to learn about this, and there's a lot of jargon in it. You can really only understand that if you're truly a specialist, and then you also need to be able to make a clear distinction between what is now truth and what does it all mean. Now, first of all, in a new development, by the way, quantum mechanics isn't new, of course, and quantum computing was already announced by IBM in 2000 or even earlier to sale that. But in such a new development, which is new and hyped, it's very important when there is a new innovation that in the beginning, there's a grouping of players and more players are joining in. And at some point, there's an industry shakeout. That's the classic theory of innovation. The losers drop out and there are only a few winners, a handful of winners that break through. So it's crucial to select the winners now for the long term growth. If you're not able to do that, then you're probably going to lose a lot of money. Well, you don't have to dive in head first, of course. You don't have to invest all your money in it. You can also just realize this is a high risk. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I do find it interesting enough to invest a very small part. But that will soon be more about the potential strategies you could apply for that. In a nutshell, quantum computing is basically based on quantum mechanics. And in that you have a particle, and a particle could be in this spot and this spot at the same time. The more you dive into it, the less you understand it. That's just almost impossible. And only a small set of people understands how that really works. And I think they go completely crazy from that. But it can be that a particle can be in multiple places at the same time. The revolution in quantum computing is that you have a regular computer. Let's call it a supercomputer. Those are the fastest calculations at the moment. They work with bits 0 and 1, and they arrange 0 and 1 in a sequence. And then you get a computer calculation. The unique thing about quantum computing is that those bits, 0 and 1, can exist at the same time. Be calculated. Then you get a superposition, as they call it. And because you can make a calculation, at the same time you can make a super fast calculation. So a supercomputer already makes super fast calculations. Quantum computing makes super fast calculations. And that is really a huge difference. If it were all true, of course I couldn't do it. 100% confirm. It's all based on theory and research and the tests that have been done. And you just have to take those scientists at their word. But let's put that aside for a moment. So quantum computing is, as you can understand, a super accelerator for things like artificial intelligence. And why the hype is not based on nothing? No. Quantum computing really has great potential. But the CEO of NVIDIA indicates that it will only be a real breakthrough in about 15 to 30 years, that it's necessary. And that's the question, who is right now? Well, those quantum computing calculations are really very interesting. And there are actually 2 types of disciplines in terms of quantum stocks. The first are companies that make a kind of chips to achieve the speed of quantum computing. And the other ones are, they call that a kind of annealing. And that's basically, I'll put it simply, solving optimization problems based on energy levels. So basically the path of least resistance, that is the best solution with the least energy. And that's why that choice is made. And it's all calculated in a very fast way. Quantum computing can be used for artificial intelligence, but also for optimization problems. Like, for example, in logistics, that's the easiest example. What I've been able to find out, but it's really about making very fast calculations. And of course, in the coming years, will there only be more and more demand for it? But the real question is this a good entry point? For that, we also need to keep an eye on the valuations and developments for the coming years. And that's the question. Well, let's take a look at some interesting quantum computing stocks that are definitely worth following. At the moment, there are only a few pure play quantum stocks that you would invest in for this new development. I'll go through it briefly. See it as further inspiration. I've already said, only invest in what you understand 100%. I'm not doing that, so I'm not investing in it at the moment. This technological development, I find it very difficult to understand what is true and what is not. But that's beside the point. Maybe you're smarter than I am. I hope so. The first one that could be interesting to at least start following is IonQ. This is actually the biggest pure play quantum stock at the moment. They all promise very large markets. Just be aware, those are really big pink clouds. Maybe it could all be true. But first of all, it will take a long time before it is achieved. And secondly, it could be a huge disappointment. One positive thing, anyway. Well, it's about solvency. You don't want these companies to go bankrupt because a new product or cycle with innovation always starts at the beginning, spending a lot of money and making a lot of losses. And at some point, you have to make that breakthrough to profitability. Stocks are thankfully not crypto. Crypto is purely speculative. Stocks are indeed based on companies, and those companies need to make a profit. So the crucial question is, when is this company going to make a profit? And if you don't understand that, and you can't properly value the company, then I would personally be cautious about what happens. IonQ is indeed led by a large team of leadership, and Peter Chapman is quite a known person, player, and has worked at Amazon. He has also led large branches. There are also other people, I don't know them all by name, of course, but they do have strong leadership team. I think there were all sorts of information about their company and what they can or cannot achieve. And personally, I find it difficult to determine whether all of this is true, yes or no. So this is all very technical, as you can see. And also with the comparison to Rigetti, which we will discuss shortly. And of course, IBM is one of the players. So pay close attention if you don't understand what is written here. Just say pass. Well, what we do understand are numbers. At least I understand that very well. And what we see at the moment is that IonQ has a valuation of 8 billion. We see that here, they don't have that much debt. So that's not bad. And the cash balance is now 365 million. We've already seen that. So there is at least short-term solvency. However, one problem is revenue. So finances, these are hard numbers. This is the reality. Well, percentage growth is extremely good. Doubling and even times 5. But in 2021, revenue was 2.1 million. Now, currently revenue is 37 million. The operational cash flow is minus 171 million. So that's a problem. And the profit margin is, of course, also negative. Yes, then you get valuations like an EV to sales of times 200 or a price to sales of times 200. Well, this actually makes me think of the valuations during the dot-com era. Situation, Yahoo, for example, an extreme valuation. Do I know how many times in the price to sales had very little revenue and a lot of potential? That's the truth. And it might be the same for these companies. Inc. Maybe it's all potentially true, but we've seen it takes many years before you develop that. So I'm very inclined to believe the CEO of NVIDIA, who I think knows more than we do. Listen, super interesting, all of it. Just, it will probably take a few years before there is, how do I say this, that the breakthrough can really happen. This is crucial to understand because the company has to start making a profit. And as long as it doesn't work, it can always go downhill. Or it has to issue more shares, which would lead to dilution. In all cases, bad scenarios for the investor. What do we see on the whole short term in terms of development? The IPO has happened, and for a long time, the valuation was very low. Recently, it has actually increased by about 6 times in a very short period. This is, of course, the first phase of the hype. I'm convinced of that. What we see here as well, and this is purely technical analysis, the shoulder movement. So if the price continues to drop in the short term and goes below the price level of 32, it could hit hard. Stand on the other side. I think it's a matter of patience and that it will take a longer time before the price level drops to a peak. but I could be completely wrong. Why could I be completely wrong? IonQ, for example, valued at 8 billion. However, I see it purely and solely from a financial perspective, from revenue and profit, but I have no idea how much the technology of IonQ is worth. I'm not really sure where they stand right now, how much they have invested in this technology, and how much it would be worth in the case of a potential acquisition. So another scenario could be that the company is indeed worth more. Maybe it's worth 20 billion purely and solely based on that technology. That's not something you find in the book values. That book value paper is times 20. Yes, oh, I have no idea what the book value of that technology is. And probably not many people know that. So that's a major drawback to the analysis that I'm sharing with you here, is that I'm not sure either, The only thing I'm pointing out is, and that kind of remains the essence of the story, if you're not sure, it's better to wait until there are new developments. And maybe if you just have patience and you don't need to take the risk. So why would you take the risk then? Often there's a better chance if you simply wait a bit. A second small player in quantum computing is Rigetti. Rigetti has been around since 2013 but has developed over the years. I don't find the current leadership team very strong, but that might just be me. And Rigetti actually makes a kind of chip for quantum computing. They call that chip Novera, a 9-qubit chip. And it says here, ready to ship today. Jan, a number of interesting presentations that the company gives, which is why they are very substantive. But also other things that are quite interesting, like various budgets from the government with large amounts, as you can see here. And if those amounts are all correct and they go to Rigetti, then it's not all that bad. It's crazy that they get these kinds of valuations, but still, it's all just uncertainty, and I keep repeating that. But hey, don't let that hold you back. What I actually want to show you is the following. It's the following. We see here a development of Rigetti from 2013 up to actually 2024 in this case. And what they indicate is here, in 2023, they launched their chip, the Novera, the chip we just talked about. Yes, so who has been commercially available since 2013? Well, once again, let's just look at the facts. Fact, in 2013, the revenue was 12 million. That's actually a lower revenue than in 2022, but also for next year. So a year later, the revenue is still just 12 million. So what's the reason that suddenly in 2025, 2 years later, the revenue is not, it could also be 12 million, but maybe 100 million? Why? Yes, because the valuation has risen significantly. So not even 2 months later, the stock has risen by about that much. 11, turned 12. So a percentage growth of more than 1,000% in just a few months. But how is it possible that a stock was worth 1.53 months ago and now suddenly at a price level of 12? How is that possible? Once again, we see the facts here on the screen. These are facts. The growth in revenue is just stagnating growth. So there is either crucial news, and that there will be a huge sales explosion and a lot of money is now going to flow into Rigetti. Either it's a hype, it's up to you to decide what it is. Of course, there's often a good reason behind it, and I've also read some news articles. However, I think you should investigate that yourself and determine for yourself about those news articles. What does all that mean? Is that all true? If we look again at just the facts, as of today, we see that the valuations are sky high. Price to sales ratio above 170. Your treasure above 300. Book value, but that doesn't say much. We see that the market value is 3.5 billion at the moment. Not a lot of debt. A little bit of cash position. Again, you need to have solvency here. You don't want it to go bankrupt. There's a lot more information in their presentations. Take your time to go through that, I would say, and it's all super interesting. But I wonder how analysts come up with certain price targets. So they could either be right, or maybe there's a further decline happening. I'm really curious to see how Rigetti will develop. I don't know either. Definitely keep following, and at this moment, there's no more news to share. The third interesting company that you would want to follow for a longer time in quantum computing is D-Wave Computing. And D-Wave is definitely a more interesting, different kind of branch. IonQ, MQ, and Rigetti make kind of chips for computer speed, computer calculations at the quantum dots level. But D-Wave actually produces, or they have the same, but they realize solutions in particular, and quantum cloud service that companies can make use of. And what's interesting is that they currently offer a 3-month free trial. They also provide a 99.9% uptime to solve all sorts of more complex problems, normalization issues. So just computer related. That's of course very interesting, because if this platform works well and companies can try it for 3 months for free, then why not? Of course, trying for free is always good. If they try it and it seems to work, then are many companies going to stay members? Of course. So that could be interesting. Or in terms of development, at this moment, New Wave has announced to have raised about 150 million. Keep in mind, this is of course an equity offering, which means dilution. That's all not interesting for investors, but they have at least raised cash again to be able to survive and probably to invest. Definitely include the investor solutions. That Wave specializes in a different branch of sports, namely annealing. I need to think about how you pronounce it, but annealing is a different kind of branch of sports, and it basically comes down to that you have difficult, complex problems that require computing power. So logistical problems of getting from A to B, that can be done in countless different ways. And annealing is basically just the quantum computing algorithm where you create numbers to determine getting from A to B is best done via this route because it uses the least energy or resistance, whatever you want to call it. This is a bit of a short summary that I'm trying to explain to myself. As simple as possible, it will undoubtedly be a yes in between. But what's important to know, in my opinion, is what the company itself says. We indicate that for the short term, so the next 3 to 5 years, because their total addressable market is around 2 to 5 billion. Let's take a look at the current valuation. That's 1.8 billion, so that's quite high considering the short term potential that they indicate themselves. And they indicate that for the long term, and at least they're being honest, that it could take 15 to 30 years. But they do say they think that it's going to be a huge market of 450 billion or even more. And that's not just about annealing, but also logic gate. What that is, I'll tell you about it in another video, because I need to do more research on it to understand it well. It all definitely has potential, and what I find interesting is that it's a cloud computing service. Actually, it is, so just a service, yes, of course. If that all works, then many companies will want to take advantage of that making power and will be willing to pay for it. So that's quite interesting in terms of potential. Definitely the problem I see, of course, is the valuation. Also here, the price for sales is above 100. According to you, it's even estimated to be 200. So I'm really curious to see how that goes. We also see the revenue. The development is new. In 2020, 5 million in revenue and 5 years later, a doubling of the revenue. Percentage growth 100% is fine, but it's only 10 million. So that's really nothing at all. In the meantime, they are burning through a lot of money. So a negative cash flow. Cash flow, minus 73 million. And of course, the profit is a significant loss. So they needed to raise money. And you can easily imagine a worst case scenario is that they will need more money in the coming years than expected. The revenue is really disappointing. The negative cash flow is eating up the company. And you have a bankrupt company, so a permanent loss. So that's the risk. The real risk isn't the volatility, but the real risk is the potential for losing money. I still think that losing money is a serious thing. This kind of hype, stocks in a speculative situation, 1.8 billion in market value. Could it be that the technology is worth more than that? I have no idea. But it could also be that the price drops significantly again. Again, in a very short time, the price has exploded. Even turned 10 times. Yes, but the way down might also be very steep. There are still a number of other stocks for quantum computing. Now we also have Quantum Computing Inc. with the ticker QBT. We're going to talk about that very briefly, because I don't think this is really determined. The best choice. What stands out is the factor analysis. Is it a strong buy, and also the owner of this whole program that often makes good calls, I think, and I really strongly believe in this program that we see here. Indicates that their algorithm does indeed confirm that there is a valuation of a C here, and that the growth can be enormous. I'm really curious because the valuation has risen to 1.2 billion. The company doesn't have a strong leadership team, if you ask me, but that's just me. And you see a price to sales of 2,000. Well, how can that be? That financial revenue? is just super small. So yeah, it's not even in the millions. So there has to be an extremely good one coming. Does this make sense? I wouldn't see this as a strong buy, to be honest. But that's just me. Recently, there has been news about quantum computing, a deal with NASA, but the reports I've seen here indicate that the deal was relatively small, so a few $20,000. On the other hand, a deal with NASA is definitely very positive, because they don't just select anyone, so there could be something about underlying values. I'm curious. For me, at this moment, it's just not enough to consider researching further. And we've already discussed those other three quantum computing stocks that could be more interesting, could be other quantum computing stocks. Of course, you have IBM. Don't forget about IBM, but right now, IBM isn't particularly special in terms of valuation. At this moment, the price earnings for next year was at 30. That's definitely on the higher side. For example, the 5-year average is 24. Other things also don't seem super positive, although the cash flow is somewhat in order. Microsoft has also achieved a breakthrough with atom computing. 20. They have managed to create 24 logical qubits, apparently a breakthrough. Microsoft right now, also because of the somewhat higher moderation, a bit less interesting. The ratio is estimated to be around 2.5. Well, that's not interesting when you talk about it. About valuation adjusted for EPS growth. Then we have Alphabet, and they have a chip, they call it Widow. And Widow, that chip is a quantum computing chip, just like what Rigetti does. At least I'm assuming it's about the same. And that chip can solve a problem in computing within 5 minutes. They can solve a computer problem within 5 minutes. What a classic computer. More than one, countless eternal time takes. So billions of years. So that's quite remarkable, of course. So yeah, here we go again. Alphabet is doing well again in terms of innovation. But as is often the case, not everything comes to a good profitable proposition from Google. So time will tell. But Google does have, although the valuation is a bit higher right now, maybe still the best prospects. Then the amazing company managed to go free at 1.4. Yes, if the whole market declines, Google could still be a perfectly fine investment. And maybe with something as interesting as JIP, Widow. But they also have a lot of other things like Waymo, a self-driving taxi service, and they have even more innovative things. So I would just stick with the big players. The winner takes it all. Maybe that will also apply to quantum computing. Well, one last strategy you could consider, at least two. The first is you can also say, yeah, I'm going to invest a very small percentage of my money, let's say for the sake of convenience, 1% in the quantum computing stocks. Let's say you take Rigetti, D-Wave, and IonQ, and you put 1% of your money into each. If it doesn't work out at all, you've lost 3% of your wealth. Yes, that's negligible. Does it really matter what happens over the next 10 years? It could easily go up tenfold, and you would have grown 3% to 30% of your portfolio. In other words, a brilliant investment. But whatever you do, please do it with small amounts. And if you're patient, there might be a better entry point that comes up. A second way, i.e., is an ETF. If you're not sure, just buy the whole bundle. Well, there's one ETF, and it's called the Defiance Quantum ETF. This is the most well-known one that tries to focus on quantum. The ticker is QTUM. A big downside right away. To start with this ETF, that's only 3, or so I think 4 of these stocks in the ETF are QPlay quantum stocks. Well, coincidentally, the 3 we've mentioned are shown above, Rigetti, D-Wave, IonQ, but for example, we also don't see Alphabet in the top 10 holdings or Microsoft. In total, there are 75 companies in it, so you have much more risk diversification, but a larger portion of that isn't necessarily focused entirely on quantum computing. This is for a daily, the expense ratio is 0.4% for this ETF, so that's not too bad. And a liquidity is relatively good at 1 billion. So that's good if you want to act quickly on what should be necessary if panic arises. In the very short term, purely based on technical analysis, what we see is 2 tops. And from a technical analysis perspective, that's usually not good news. That could mean that a resistance level is forming here. Why is technical analysis possibly interesting in this case? Well, I can assure you that the appreciation of all these holdings together is great, is also on the high side. So if something is overvalued and the technical analysis setup indicates it, it might just go down. It could go down, and it could go down hard. It just follows the whole routine of all the other stocks we've talked about. Valuation matters, always. So always pay attention to the valuation. It could very well be that this is the last peak of the time as we've seen it now, and that there will be a further decline but no one wants to be certain about this. The only thing I know at this moment is those two tops here are not very positive to see. The stochastics is declining. Let's see what the RSI says. The RSI is also, you can also see a crossover downwards. So that's never positive. And only the MACD is still positive, but the gap here can be closed. And if it crosses downwards, you can also see that the momentum is decreasing. And the momentum is dropping below this price level here of 78. Then you don't have good news regarding technical analysis. But that's just for inspiration to show what ways there are to invest in quantum computing. They are riskier. Expectative stocks at the moment, relatively low turnover, but the potential is huge. It's a very large market in potential. I wonder if these companies, Rigetti, D-Wave, IonQ, are the best investments, or is it just that big players like Alphabet or Nvidia are having these companies acquired or developing something themselves? What might be even better is, so here it's about the long history of such a company. Does it have a first mover advantage in developing quantum chips that achieve the highest possible returns? Annealing solves most of the problems in terms of optimization issues and that sort of thing. I'm not at an early stage yet to be able to determine. I wonder if I'll ever reach that level. This is very substantive, difficult knowledge, and I think you need to be an industry expert to say something useful about it. If you can't do that, then I won't do it either. That's about quantum computing. So the new top, super interesting. I think it's currently a hype, but we'll see if it starts to drop. Could it possibly keep declining for a longer period? And maybe then an instant moment will arise. That could be more interesting. That's my opinion. Thank you for watching, happy investors, and until next time.